Simeon, the second son of Jacob and Leah, was born in the shadow of his older brother Reuben. His name, Simeon, meaning heard in Hebrew, reflected Leah's heartfelt belief that God had listened to her cries for love and recognition from her husband Jacob. From the very beginning, Simeon's story carried the weight of hope and promise. Yet, as his life unfolded, it became a tale marked by impulsive decisions and a fiery temper that would cast long shadows over his family and future generations. Simeon's passionate and volatile nature was never more evident than during one of the most shocking events in the Bible, the massacre at Shechem. This grim chapter began with a terrible act of dishonor. Dinah, Jacob's only daughter, and Simeon's cherished sister, was violated by Shechem, the prince of the land. Stricken with infatuation for Dinah, even after his vile act, Shechem sought to marry her. His father, Hamor, approached Jacob with a proposal to unite their families through marriage and forge an alliance. But Simeon and Levi, Dinah's full brothers, burned with fury at the insult and pain inflicted on their sister. To them, this was more than a family slight. It was an outrage against their honor, demanding not just reparation, but swift, unrelenting justice. Fueled by their righteous anger, the brothers devised a cunning plan cloaked in false agreement. They proposed a condition for the marriage. Every male in the city of Shechem must undergo circumcision. Eager for the alliance and blinded by their ambitions, the men of Shechem agreed, submitting to the painful ritual without hesitation. On the third day, when the men of Shechem were still weakened from the circumcision, Simeon and Levi seized their moment. With their swords in hand and vengeance in their hearts, the two brothers descended upon the city with ruthless precision. In a calculated and merciless attack, they slaughtered every male, sparing no one, not even Shechem or his father, Hamor. The massacre was swift and devastating. But their wrath did not end with bloodshed. They plundered the city, seizing women, children, and all their possessions as spoils of their revenge. What had started as an act of justice for their sister Dinah had spiraled into a brutal display of unchecked rage. The echoes of their actions spread far beyond Shechem, shocking the surrounding region and striking fear into the hearts of many. When Jacob learned of the massacre, he was horrified. His sons' actions threatened not only their reputation, but the very survival of their family. His rebuke was sharp and filled with foreboding. "You have brought trouble on me by making me a stench to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I and my household will be destroyed." Yet Simeon and Levi were unapologetic. Their response was as chilling as it was resolute. Should he have treated our sister like a prostitute? This stark exchange laid bare the depth of Simeon's anger and his unyielding sense of honor. He believed their actions were justified, a necessary response to the dishonor inflicted upon their family. But Simeon's fury, though rooted in a desire for justice, blinded him to the larger consequences of his actions. His sense of honor turned to vengeance, and his vengeance into a massacre, a decision that forever tainted his reputation. Jacob's fears were not unfounded. Such an act of violence could have easily provoked the neighboring tribes into retaliation, threatening the survival of his family. Yet, by God's mercy, the surrounding peoples were struck with fear, and Jacob's household was spared from retribution. Even so, Simeon and Levi's actions left a permanent mark. Jacob would never forget what his sons had done. Their rash and vengeful actions cast a long shadow, one that would resurface years later when Jacob pronounced blessings and rebukes over his sons on his deathbed. Unlike Reuben, whose downfall stemmed from personal moral failure, Simeon's descent was rooted in an unbridled rage and an insatiable thirst for vengeance. His zealous defense of his sister's honor led him to commit a massacre that forever tainted his family's name. Though deeply disappointed by his son's actions, Jacob did not immediately strip Simeon of his rights. Yet, as often happens, the consequences of Simeon's choices would come to light much later, when Jacob, on his deathbed, spoke final blessings over his sons. After the Shechem massacre, Simeon's presence in the biblical narrative begins to fade, yet his fiery temper and propensity for conflict resurface in other ways. He remained a man of action, impulsive, unyielding, and sometimes cruel. These traits came to the forefront again in his treatment of his younger brother Joseph. Simeon, along with his other brothers, was consumed by jealousy toward Joseph. Their father's obvious favoritism and Joseph's prophetic dreams of ruling over them fanned the flames of their resentment. When an opportunity arose to rid themselves of Joseph, Simeon became one of the most vocal instigators. While Reuben sought to spare Joseph's life by suggesting they throw him into a pit rather than kill him outright, Simeon joined the others in devising a more sinister plan. They sold Joseph into slavery, pocketing the silver and concocting a lie about his death to present to their grieving father. Simeon's role in this betrayal revealed not only his harsh and callous nature, but also his inability to see the devastating consequences of his actions. The rift caused by this treachery would take years to mend. When famine later drove Jacob's family to seek grain in Egypt, Simeon's past actions came back to haunt him. In a twist of poetic justice, when Joseph, now a powerful ruler in Egypt, encountered his brothers, it was Simeon whom he chose to imprison as collateral while the others returned to Canaan. This was no random choice. Joseph's decision was deliberate, a symbolic reckoning for Simeon's role in selling him into slavery. Though Simeon had long since forgotten the depth of his cruelty, Joseph had not. Simeon's life paints the picture of a man who consistently allowed his emotions to rule him. His devotion to family honor and loyalty, though admirable on the surface, was expressed through violence and vengeance. Time and time again, he acted first and thought later, attempting to seize control in situations where he felt the dignity of his family was at stake. This fiery disposition made him a dangerous ally and a fearsome adversary. But Simeon's defining flaw was not just his capacity for anger, it was his unwillingness or inability to temper that anger with wisdom or restraint. While his brothers, despite their own failings, eventually displayed signs of growth and transformation, Simeon's character remained rigid and unyielding. He was the same impulsive, hot-tempered man throughout his life, never learning from his mistakes. His intense need for retribution cost him dearly. Not only the trust and respect of his father, but also the stain of his violent reputation, which followed him to the end of his days. For Simeon, his legacy was one of bloodshed, a man consumed by his passions, unable to escape the shadow of his own choices. Levi, the third son of Jacob and Leah, was a man of unrelenting intensity, a firebrand defined by passion and zeal. His life, like a smoldering flame, burned with loyalty and conviction, yet it was also marked by the devastating consequences of unchecked anger. Alongside his older brother Simeon, Levi etched his name into one of the darkest and bloodiest chapters in Jacob's family history, the massacre at Shechem. But unlike Simeon, whose anger spiraled into disgrace and obscurity, Levi's fiery nature would later be transformed into a powerful force for divine purpose. leaving a surprising and sacred legacy. Levi's early years were inextricably bound to Simeon's. Together, they were a formidable duo, brothers whose fierce loyalty to their family made them both dangerous and relentless. Their defining act of vengeance came in response to the defilement of their sister Dinah by Shechem, the prince of the land. For Levi, this was not merely an offense, it was an affront to his family's honor, and it demanded swift and uncompromising justice. Consumed by outrage, Levi and Simeon devised a cunning plan. When Shechem's father, Hamor, came to propose a marriage alliance, the brothers feigned agreement but imposed one shocking condition. Every male in the city of Shechem must first be circumcised. The men of Shechem, eager for peace and union, complied. But Levi and Simeon's plan was not one of reconciliation. It was one of calculated retribution. On the third day, when the men of Shechem were weakened by the procedure, Levi and Simeon struck. With swords in hand and vengeance in their hearts, they swept through the city with brutal precision, slaughtering every male, including Shechem and Hamor. Yet their wrath did not stop with bloodshed. They looted the city, taking its women and children captive and seizing its livestock and possessions. For Levi, this massacre was not merely about avenging Dinah, it was about making a statement, a bold and fearsome declaration that no one could trample upon their family's honor without paying the ultimate price. But what Levi saw as justice, Jacob saw as a disgrace. When Jacob learned of the massacre, his reaction was not pride, but horror. "You have made me a stench to the people of this land." He rebuked them sharply. "If they gather against us, I and my household will be destroyed." But Levi, unyielding in his convictions, expressed no regret. In his eyes, the defense of his family's dignity justified any cost, even if it meant defying his father and endangering his family's survival. Levi's unrestrained zeal left a deep scar on his relationship with Jacob, a wound that would never fully heal. Years later, as Jacob lay on his deathbed and delivered his final blessings, his words to Levi were not blessings at all, but a stinging rebuke. "Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council, let me not join their assembly, for they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased. Cursed be their anger, so fierce, and their fury, so cruel. I will scatter them in Jacob and disperse them in Israel." These words were a painful reminder of Levi's unchecked temper and the chaos it had wrought. Jacob's condemnation stripped Levi of any hope of leadership and foretold that his descendants would be scattered and divided. For a time, it seemed that Levi's story would end as a cautionary tale, a life defined by wasted potential, consumed by the fires of uncontrolled passion. Yet Levi's story took an unexpected turn. Unlike Simeon, who faded into a legacy of conflict and obscurity, Levi's zeal was not extinguished, but refined. Over time, his descendants, though scattered, were set apart for a sacred purpose. Levi's fire, once destructive, would be harnessed to serve God. His lineage became the priestly tribe of Israel, tasked with the spiritual leadership of the nation. In an extraordinary twist, the same intensity that had once led to bloodshed would later be channeled into devotion, discipline, and worship. Levi's journey is a story of redemption, a man whose unchecked passion once brought shame and fear, but whose descendants would rise to fulfill a divine calling. From the ashes of violence, Levi's legacy was transformed into one of service and holiness, proving that even the fiercest fire can be tamed and repurposed for good. Generations after Levi's fiery temper carved his name into a legacy of shame and bloodshed. A turning point emerged. a moment that would redefine his descendants' destiny and transform his story from condemnation to redemption. It came during one of Israel's darkest hours, the worship of the golden calf at Mount Sinai. The scene was chaotic. The Israelites, impatient during Moses' prolonged absence on the mountain, crafted a golden calf and began worshipping it in blatant rebellion against God. The air was thick with the sound of idolatrous chants, and the clinking of golden jewelry melted into an idol. As Moses descended from the mountain, stone tablets of God's law in hand, he found his people mired in sin, their allegiance to the Lord shattered. It was in this moment of crisis that the tribe of Levi stepped into a new role. When Moses called out, "Whoever is on the Lord's side, come to me," it was the Levites who rallied to him. They stood firm against the wave of idolatry, willing to execute God's judgment even when it meant turning against their sons, brothers, and neighbors. It was a fierce and painful loyalty, a zeal reminiscent of Levi's own, but this time it was directed toward righteousness and holiness, not vengeance and destruction. Moses proclaimed their unique calling that day. "You have been set apart to the Lord today, for you were against your sons and brothers, and he has blessed you." With these words, the trajectory of Levi's lineage shifted forever. What had been a legacy of dishonor was now marked by consecration and purpose. From that moment forward, the tribe of Levi was entrusted with a sacred mission. They became the spiritual leaders of Israel, set apart to serve as priests and guardians of the tabernacle. They taught the law, officiated sacrifices, and upheld the sanctity of Israel's worship. Levi's descendants were given the privilege of serving directly in God's presence, a role unparalleled among the tribes. Jacob's prophecy of scattering, once spoken as a curse, found its fulfillment in a way no one could have imagined. The Levites received no inheritance of land like the other tribes, but instead they were scattered throughout Israel as teachers and spiritual guides. Their dispersal became a means of placing God's representatives in every corner of the nation, a powerful reversal of their forefathers' shameful legacy. Levi's story is a profound testament to the dual-edged nature of passion and zeal. When unchecked, it led to violence and dishonor, but when refined by God, it became a force for holiness and service. The fiery intensity that once made Levi a man of bloodshed was transformed into a sacred fire, burning brightly in the hearts of his descendants as they served in the presence of the Almighty. Stay with us as we journey deeper into the lives of Jacob's 12 sons, uncovering their legacies and the pivotal roles they played in the unfolding story of God's people. If you're eager to explore more fascinating insights, click the link for additional videos from our channel. And don't forget, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode in this powerful series. Together, let's discover the timeless truths woven into the Word of God and see how they resonate in our lives today. May God richly bless you, and we'll see you in the next episode.